SwiftUI lists have some predefined stylings that you can choose between inset group list style, inset group, plain, and sidebar. But did you know you can actually do a lot more customization with this? You can see now on the screen the list with the same data, with the same sections. But on the right, I actually modified a lot. For example, I changed the list background, this raw backgrounds. I even added here shapes that are half transparent. I changed the colors. In this case, I also changed the insets and the cell height. I changed the separators. So in this case, in this middle section, I actually removed the separators, whereas in the last section, I changed the color. I added here insets to the leading edge and made this dark. And comparing the default styling and what I did to this list, they don't look the same at all. Now, I'm not saying that you're supposed to always have this kind of styling, but I just try to use all the newer features for list styling and to see how much I can actually change it. And in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to transform the left side, the default, to this custom styling. If you want, you can also try this yourself as a little challenge to see how much you already know. Now, if you want to use my code, you can find a link in the description box. Okay, now if you have a look at the list data that I'm using here, so I have this very basic food type that has a name of type string, an icon of string. So I just use emojis to make it simple for this test. A Boolean value is favored. I also added a color. This is because I wanted to have different cell background colors, and I'm using this from the data. Then I added here, because I only care about the UI, I don't really care about the data behind it, basically only using here dummy data. So I can create 3 different samples of fruits, some fast food with pizza and burgers, and some sweets. This I then used in this list, starting with creating 3 state properties of food arrays. In the body of this view, I have a list with 3 sections. A section for fruit, a section for sweet, and then one here for fast food. And for this section, I also have a footer. Now in the preview, I have 2 different stylings. So I use the first step would be the default, and in this case, it's the inset grouped. And the second one, just for testing, I added here this inset, so we see what I actually change. As you see, not a very special data. And we can start customizing the appearance of this list. The first thing that I want to do is changing the list separators. So for the second section, I actually removed the separators. And for the last section, I changed the separator color to yellow or orange. So the second section with sweets, you can say list for separator visibility. This has automatic, hidden, and visible. I want to hide them, and they are disappearing. Also the one from the section. You can either add this to the whole section or to the for each or to each of these lists. In this case, it doesn't make a difference because I don't have a footer. Maybe I should have added this also as a test for the last one. So if I add it to the last one, all of the section separators are removed, or if you add it to the for each. Now the section separator is there. You have a list or list section separator. So if you want to only hide the separator, you can also do this. Okay, I'm just going to remove these. So I didn't actually want to do that. For the last section, I wanted to change the color of the separators. And we have a list raw separator tint. So list raw separator tint. And what did I say? Orange. So these lines are now orange. And because I only added this to the raws in this case, they didn't actually change the one from the section. So the last one still stays gray. You can also change this list raw separator has another input argument, which is edge. So you can say all top or bottom. And if I say top, only the top are changed. So above pizza and above burger, but not the last one. In my case, I'm guessing I just use all. This is the default one and I remove the second argument. Now let's talk about the size and edgeInsets. So lists have a default list row height, and this is set from the environment. So if I attach this, maybe I just close. After the list, I need to attach this. And this is list default minimum list row height. Let's say 50. And then environment default minimum list header height of 70. And now my lists got a lot higher. Or for example, here the section headers, they got a lot bigger than before. But also these cells. Maybe I overdid it a little bit. So I am going to use for the headers only 45. This looks reasonable. Now, the other thing you might want to do is add insets. Need to expand my list again. And I want to inset, for example, here in my fast food section. Here, this area is on the top. This is the default insets. And the last one, I inset them more. And I only inset actually the rows, not the whole section. You see the section header and the footer, they are the same. So if you extend this line, the header and the footer start with this default one. So I add my edgeInsets around for each inside this section. List row insets with in it from top, leading, bottom, and trailing. Now, when you add insets to the rows, the top and bottom don't really work, so you should stick with 0. Start with 0, 0. And the leading and trailing, let's use 60. And they moved in. So now there's a large difference here. Also, the insets, the separators moved in. Can also check this for the other styling with inset group. Now I also want to inset my second section, but as you see here, the header also has an inset. In order to also inset the header, I need to attach this list row inset not inside of the section, but outside of the section. So here, list row insets, again with top, leading, bottom, and trailing. If you add it to the sections, the top and bottom insets are actually applied to the header and the footer, but not to the rows inside. For example, you can add here 50 for top just to see. Let's use 40 for leading and trailing and 0 for bottom. So now it moved inside, and I actually moved the top also, but only for the for the header. So I'm going to remove this. I don't like these bottom and top. As you saw, actually the row didn't change. So it seems to be just leading and trailing that are useful. But now I have them nicely aligned here, the section header and the rows and their insert also on the trailing edge. So we have now this 2 different versions of how to change the insets. Then, since I already started talking about the headers, we can easily modify them. So you have the possibility to use for iOS 16, there's a header prominence increased. I actually set this to higher version so we can test this. So we could use here a header prominence of increased. And you see the suites becomes bigger and bold. And it's also not using the all caps anymore. But it's actually easier. So you only have increased and default. And if you want to have even larger or something different, you can, because I use the initializer section with header, I have my header returns a view. So you can customize this here by saying I use a font of title. Then I can make this bold. I can change the foreground color to white. I can add a shadow with a radius of 5. We can also do the second example here with this header, because I also have the footer. For example, we could make the foreground of the header again black, and for the footer we are using white. Let's just see. Yes, I used the same colors as in the example. And it's time to move on, because you can't really see much. It's actually time to move on and change the background. Changing the background of a list is a new feature. And you can change this with the scroll content background modifier. Here you can say visibility. Again, it's visible, automatic, or hidden. This view modifier is only available for iOS 16 and macOS 13. And the reason I think is because SwiftUI lists and the way it's implemented is shifted. Previously, it was with UI table views, and now they're using UI collection views. So if you used to do something like in the initializer, changing the appearance of UI table, appearance, background color to clear, this is only working for the lower versions. You can use this for the lower versions. And this is basically what I'm setting here as the default of all of my table views that you create for your whole project. This is not animating properly, so you might have some stuttering of, you actually didn't want to change this one, but this one. If you want to use this for lower versions, I would suggest to set this to clear per default in the main app, so when you launch, and then set the background colors manually. Just going to remove this. What do I mean with set this background manually? What I did is I've hidden the background. I cleared the background color, so that now when I add a background, I can use color.cyan. Now I can use whatever color I want to. There used to be one version where also with the scroll content background you could change directly you could directly say which color you wanted to have. That one they removed, so you have to go with this two-step process of hide the default and add your own. Now I wanted to make this a little bit more interesting, so I added a image in the assets, scale to fill, and before that I actually need to make it resizable. Then edges ignore save area.all. Now, because this is maybe a little bit difficult to read sometimes, I actually added some blur and another color overlay. So I'm blurring the background with radius of 3, and I add a overlay with another color. So this is color.indigo.opacity 0.2. So this gives it a little bit more shade of this color, although I could have probably also used color multiply. So this is color multiply. Okay, this is probably a little bit too much. Let's go back to this slide overlay. Now the next thing that I want to adjust is this cell background. And we are going to start with maybe the last section, because this seems to be, only black seems to be easy. For the unhealthy foods, to this for each, I also want to add a list row background. And here you can specify a view. This is very important, not just a color, a whole view. In this case, I want to have color.black. And my main text is gone. And in this example, I think I set it to the foreground color to pink. So this is foreground color pink. Now I attach the same colors to the whole section. Just going back to inset. If you see here that it actually did not apply to the footer. If you want to apply it to the footer, you need to attach it to the whole section. Now the footer is also dark. Okay, next I want to actually have a different color for each of my rows, like in the first section. I want to use the color that I had in my model, the foods color. So I go in the first section, and I'm not attaching it to the for each, I'm directly attaching it here to the food row. This is list row background. and I use the foods color. So I nicely use the different colors that look good already. And now the last section is the one with sweets. And this one is not just using colors, I'm actually taking really advantage of that, the fact that this list row background has a view taking it. I try to use images, but they just don't look good. What works nicely is a shape, list row background, and what I could use is a capsule. Now this is black, but I want to have half white, so I use color from white and opacity, so it's 1 and opacity 0.5. Okay, 0.5 is too much. I use 8. Maybe I'm going to format this a little bit better. Now, as you see, they touch. This is because I set the whole list raw's background to this capsule. So if I want to have a padding, I need to attach add the padding to the capsule, to the background. Just not too much. So let's try 2. So I at least have it in the vertical direction. So this is looking good in the horizontal. But I need to also insert it in the vertical direction. So this is vertical. Let's do this differently. Padding horizontal of 10. And now this one, the horizontal one, depends on the edgeInsets. So you saw here I used 40. So from the first element to the edge, it's 40. And now my capsule is from the beginning to from the edge to its edge, it's 10. If you want to have it in between here, the start of my content and the edge of my list, I use 20, because 20 is the half of 40. And the last thing that I wanted to do is also change the foreground color, because this black is looking a little bit boring. So we are using here indigo or something. Foreground colors are very simple. You just add foreground color of indigo. And just as a comparison, I'm using the inset grouped. And actually, I probably should not make the last section fully black, because in this case, the footer doesn't look good. So I take the list row background and move it into this section. Okay, and now it looks like I managed to reconstruct all the settings. And let's just go through when you can actually use which one. So list row background is iOS 13, so this is no problem. List row separator, I think it was newer. Yeah, this is for 15. This header initializer is also backwards compatible to iOS 13. List row separator tint, again iOS 15. Header prominence is also iOS 15. Default row heights are quite long, also no problem, iOS 13. The only one that is really new that is not so far backward compatible is this scroll content background. Is hidden. This is only for iOS 16. As you see, if your app supports iOS 15 and higher, you can use most of these features, which is great news. It has taken quite a long time until we got all these updates. Now, one thing I just want to mention is that because I customized here this appearance, if you want to do something with a selection, you also can change the selection. So in case you are using the list selection property, and you want to customize the list selected color, you can again use this list raw background, and then checking, is the item or the foods that I have for this raw, is this the selected item? I have to use the ID, so that's why I compare IDs. If it is, I use green as the background color, and otherwise I use the default background color. So if I tap here, you see my selection is now green. You can also do the same for the foreground color. You can also toggle the foreground color or some other appearance, whatever you want to. This one I actually like because sometimes it's just not very visible. But the selected color also depends on if it's in the sidebar. The selected color usually in the list is not just a gray Like here, usually when you run it, it's the accent color. So most of the time it would be like a bright color. But as you see, you can also customize this and go away from the default that might be not interesting for all of your cases. In case you can't do what you want with lists, there's another tool that you can use, which is SwiftUI Scroll View. And I will link the tutorial here, so go check it out. There's even more interesting UIs to build with horizontal scrolling in grids and programmatically scrolling and all this good stuff. If you like this video, don't forget to like and share this video. Until next time, happy coding!